It happened in 3 seconds. 3 seconds from the moment Henry raised his weapon to the moment the first man hit the floor. Nobody expected it. The quiet volunteer nurse everyone overlooked wasn't just a nurse. She was Staff Sergeant Hannah Blake, 75th Ranger Regiment, 7 deployments, and tonight she was about to prove that the wrong people had chosen the wrong border clinic. 6 hours earlier, Hannah Blake sat on the cracked concrete steps outside her tiny trailer, the Arizona sun sinking behind the jagged ridges of the Huachuca Mountains. The sky bled pink and orange, colors no painter could ever capture, colors that reminded her of Afghanistan's sunsets over forward operating bases under mortar fire, or nights when tracer rounds painted the desert like fireworks she didn't want to celebrate. She didn't look at the beauty, she just let it exist around her. A rare moment that required nothing from her, demanded nothing. The Desert Light Clinic, a converted warehouse 2 miles from the Mexican border, wasn't much. Its metal walls radiated heat during the day and froze at night. 4 exam rooms, 1 procedure table older than some of the volunteers, a supply closet that seemed cursed with shortages, and an X-ray machine that functioned when it felt like it. A faint stench of dried citrus hung in the corners, a ghost from the warehouse's past life as a produce distribution center. Yet, for the people who had nowhere else to go, it was a sanctuary. And for 18 months, Hannah had been the one they trusted to save them. At 35, Hannah looked every bit the part of a humanitarian nurse, hardened by years of service. But there was something in her that hinted at another life, one fewer people had ever seen. Lean, muscular, with shoulders and arms built from long runs and years of carrying more than her own weight, she moved like someone who knew exactly how much force was necessary to do a job and never wasted an ounce. Her sun-bleached hair was braided tightly, the kind of braid that could survive windstorms or violent encounters, and her gray-blue eyes were calm, sharp, always assessing, always calculating. And yet, freckles across the bridge of her nose softened her face, giving her patients, especially children, something to cling to. They counted them during exams. Mothers pointed to them and smiled, and somehow trust was built quietly in that small, fragile way. Tonight, those hands, steady enough to thread sutures in a moving vehicle, gentle enough to cradle premature infants, wrapped around a chipped mug of black coffee. Steam curled upward in the cool desert night as she dialed her father's number in Iowa. "Hey, Dad, how was your day?" she asked softly, her voice carrying the faint tremor she only allowed him to hear. "Same as always, kiddo. The wind blew, the corn grew." His voice cracked halfway through. The pancreatic cancer that had stolen so much from him had left him smaller, quieter, fragile. Hannah smiled anyway, masking the ache behind her ribs. "I'm getting there, Dad," she lied. He always knew she was lying, always had, even from the time she was 12, when a scraped arm became a story about climbing a tree rather than facing bullies. Even from Fort Benning, after grueling ranger selection, when she said, "Everything's fine," he had always known otherwise. Inside the clinic, Danny Ortega, a nervous 23-year-old volunteer EMT, was restocking supplies. His hands trembled slightly as he rearranged gauze and saline, a rookie navigating a world far heavier than he'd anticipated. Hannah watched him quietly, the way she had for months, guiding without instruction, correcting without words. This clinic wasn't just a medical facility. It was a battlefield of compassion, logistics, and moral responsibility, and everyone under her care depended on her to orchestrate it all. Beneath her trailer, tucked next to a worn Bible and a pair of running shoes with more than 2,500 miles logged, lay her Remington 700. She told herself it was for coyotes, the 4-legged predators of the desert. But the truth was more complicated. In the past month, someone had slipped 2 notes under her door, typed, clear, threatening. "Stop treating cargo, final warning." She had burned them, confident that no one could threaten her patients and herself, not here, not in her space, not ever. She didn't need protection. She rarely let anyone help her. Then her satellite phone buzzed. Maria Elena, a humanitarian aid worker 15 miles south, calling with urgent news, 22 migrants, family units, some injured, abandoned in the desert. Standard border night, but tonight the stakes were higher. Hannah's fingers tightened around the phone. She didn't wait for the call to end. Scrubs went on, boots laced, hands that had held the dying, steadied the frantic, and moved with surgical precision, shook off the warmth of coffee, and assumed their true purpose. "Danny," she said, voice calm, authoritative, commanding in a way that silenced all doubt. "Grab flashlights, GPS, water. 2 clicks northeast. Dry wash near the power line. Guide abandoned them. Go." Danny hesitated, swallowing hard, his face pale under the fluorescent trailer lights. He was a med student, a volunteer, someone with good intentions but limited experience in the chaos that awaited them. He nodded, understanding that hesitation would get no sympathy here. Hannah didn't wait. She stepped into the clinic's dim interior, the metallic scent of heat and antiseptic mixing with dust and sweat. She scanned the rooms like a soldier on reconnaissance, noting obstacles, exits, and positions of both patients and volunteers. Every corner, every shadow, every tool became a part of her mental map. This wasn't just a rescue. This was survival. She paused at exam room 2, eyes lingering on the pediatric bed where a little boy slept fitfully, fevered and fragile. Her jaw tightened. Every child here represented a life she could not and would not lose. She counted them silently. 12. No margin for error, no distractions, just movement, purpose, and focus. The instincts of someone who had navigated worse than the Arizona desert. Someone who had carried more responsibility than any civilian could imagine. Hannah took a deep breath. The desert night pressed against the walls, the silence broken only by the rustle of a distant rodent and the faint hum of the border fence. Somewhere out there the migrants waited. She was ready, and she already knew nothing tonight would be ordinary. Hannah moved with precision, prepping 4 exam rooms simultaneously. Saline drips hung from hooks, sterile gauze stacked neatly on stainless trays, pediatric doses of ibuprofen and acetaminophen counted and lined up like soldiers awaiting orders. The desert spared no mercy. For adults, heat, dehydration, and exhaustion were brutal but survivable. For children, it was merciless. Untreated infections that crept silently, sunburned skin blistering under the unforgiving sun, tiny bodies teetering on the edge of collapse. Every item she placed on a tray could mean life or death. By 11:40 p.m., Espinosa Martinez, 58, the clinic's coordinator, crossed the threshold. She carried no authority here, only presence, a quiet warmth, coffee in a chipped mug, blankets folded carefully, no questions asked. She simply set down the supplies and exhaled, knowing Hannah had already orchestrated everything. 22 migrants arrived minutes later, families clinging together, some limping, others faint from exhaustion, all eyes reflecting fear, hope, and desperation. Hannah scanned them, counting each one silently, hands moving even as she acknowledged them with nods and soft murmurs. She always counted, always remembered, a habit from another life, a life where numbers meant survival, lives balanced on the edge of precision in places most people would never see. And then the door opened again. This time it was not the soft shuffle of sandals on dirt, nor the exhausted dragging of small bodies. It was deliberate, military, tactical. 6 men, all in black uniforms, each piece of gear meticulously fitted, night vision mounted to helmets, plates over their chests, rifles cradled like extensions of their arms, sidearms at the ready. They moved with the fluid precision of trained killers. And at the forefront, Henry Crawford, 38, a man whose reputation whispered through the underworld. Former mercenary, cartel enforcer, a man who had survived conflicts most would die trying to comprehend. Calm, deliberate, scanning the clinic like a strategist reading terrain, his hand brushing the cross hanging around his neck, crossing himself as though seeking absolution for the violence to come. Everyone inside. "Now," he ordered, voice low, measured, like a steel blade sliding over stone. A young mother froze, toddler clutched to her chest, eyes wide with terror. Time seemed to slow. Henry's gaze fell on her, not with cruelty, but with the silent weight of someone who had seen too much and expected compliance without question. Her legs wanted to run, her arms wanted to shield her child, but his presence alone compressed every instinct into frozen stillness. "You're the nurse," Henry said, pointing directly at Hannah. Hannah's hands were steady, almost unnaturally so. Gauze in one, pediatric chart in the other, every movement precise, calm, controlled. She did not flinch. She did not speak. Not fear, not hesitation. Just awareness. "I'm the nurse practitioner," she said, voice even, authoritative. "This is a humanitarian clinic. What you have, we need. What she has, we can fix." Henry's eyes scanned the room, then settled on a woman at the back, pale, clutching her side. Blood seeped through her clothes, dark and glistening under the harsh clinic lights. Hannah's heart rate ticked up, not from fear, but anticipation. She recognized the signs immediately: penetrating abdominal trauma, likely liver involvement. The wound was hours old. Infection was already brewing. Minutes mattered. Every second could mean life or death. Henry gestured sharply. "She first..." Hannah moved without hesitation. She stabilized the woman on the gurney, gloved hands working rapidly to assess vitals, control bleeding, and prepare for emergency intervention. The clinic, once a haven for the sick and lost, had transformed in an instant. The fluorescent lights reflected off polished instruments, rifles and sweat-streaked faces. Every sound, ragged breathing, the hum of the old X-ray, the subtle click of Henry's pistol, was magnified in the tense silence. This wasn't a clinic anymore. This was a battlefield. Every decision, every movement, every choice carried weight. And Hannah, the volunteer nurse so many had underestimated, was preparing for war. Her mind raced with protocol, improvisation, and survival instinct honed in places that would make others crumble. She didn't flinch. She didn't hesitate. She only moved forward, calm, precise, lethal in her efficiency. Because tonight, saving lives would demand more than skill. It would demand courage under fire. Hannah positioned the children in exam room 3 with methodical precision, her eyes scanning every angle. Chairs against walls, blankets shielding the youngest, small hands gripping tiny stuffed animals like anchors to sanity. She cleared sight lines, moved medical supplies back to the supply closet, and mapped choke points with the kind of instinct only honed on battlefields could produce. Every motion was intentional, every second calculated. The faint hum of the clinic's aging fluorescent lights seemed louder, each flicker marking the heartbeat of impending violence. Outside, DEA agent Rafael Mendoza lay prone behind a jagged ridge, chest pressed to the sand-scorched earth. His left arm throbbed with pain, 2 gunshots from a border ambush, and his body moved on instinct alone, crawling inch by inch, tracking Henry Crawford's team through GPS coordinates. Through his scope, he caught a glimpse of her. Blonde hair braided tight in a French plait, scrub top clinging to her body from sweat and coffee, hands moving with almost imperceptible speed. His eyes widened. He whispered, barely audible over the desert wind, "No way, she's Shepard." Back inside, Hannah's hands worked as they had in far worse conditions, under mortar fire in Afghanistan, inside crumbling field hospitals, in the shadow of death where seconds meant life or annihilation. 4 lines threaded with precision, blood transfusions started in the nick of time, ketamine administered to calm the conscious agony, patients stabilized as her gaze flicked to every corner of the room. Henry's men advanced, confident in their numbers, unaware that their prey was no ordinary nurse. One of them, Victor Fuentes, former Mexican Special Forces, a predator in his own right, noticed the efficiency, the silent choreography of survival. There was no hesitation, no wasted motion. Something about her was off. Seconds stretched. Each tick of the clock was magnified, each breath a countdown. Henry stepped forward, his voice low and venomous. "She lives, or you answer my questions." Hannah's voice remained calm, measured, authoritative. Children secured, threats neutralized, patients stabilized, no one else is hurt. Then, like a flash, the battlefield shifted. A 14-gauge needle pierced Henry's carotid with surgical precision. 4 seconds. His knees buckled, eyes wide with shock, mouth opening in a silent scream. Hannah pivoted immediately, hurling a surgical tray at another assailant to distract him, syringing ketamine into the arm of a third before he could react. Every move fluid, instinctive, deadly efficient. Controlled chaos, executed with brutal precision. Victor's mind raced. Recognition dawned, a cold realization settling like ice. This wasn't a civilian nurse. This was military, former ranger. Call sign Shepherd. Every movement screamed training, experience, battlefield awareness. Every glance calculated threats, calculated survival, calculated the protection of the helpless. 6 seconds. 6 men neutralized. No shots fired from her side. No collateral damage. No hesitation. Pure survival, pure precision, surgical in its brutality. The room was still. Only the soft moans of the injured and the hushed whimpers of frightened children filled the air. Hannah stood over the fallen, chest rising steadily, eyes scanning, breathing measured, every sense alert. The Desert Light Clinic was silent, but it wasn't safe yet. Outside, Mendoza adjusted his scope, seeing the aftermath, and whispered again, awestruck. "She's not just a nurse, she's a ghost, a weapon, and she's protecting the innocent." Hannah looked at the children, their wide eyes reflecting fear, confusion, and now, strangely, trust. She allowed herself a single exhale, the weight of the moment pressing down but never breaking her calm. The battlefield was clear, for now, but the desert had a long memory, and she knew more danger was coming. Every muscle in her body tensed. Every decision she'd made in the past, every mission, every battlefield, every life she'd saved or lost had led to this moment, and she would not fail. Not here, not tonight. Because in this place, with these lives in her hands, Hannah Blake Shepherd was more than a nurse. She was a force of nature. DEA backup arrived within minutes, engines kicking up clouds of dust as officers fanned out around the Desert Light Clinic. The scene inside was almost surreal. Henry Crawford's team lay incapacitated, strategically positioned by a woman nobody outside this desert had ever truly known. The 22 migrants were unharmed, huddled together, clinging to each other with relief and disbelief. Danny Ortega, the young EMT, sat frozen against the wall, wide-eyed, clutching his medical bag like it might disappear if he let go. And there she was, Hannah Blake, scrub soaked in blood, sleeves rolled up, elbow deep in the grim reality of saving a life. The Desert Light Clinic, once a quiet beacon for the lost, had transformed into an impenetrable fortress where healing and defense existed simultaneously. Minutes earlier, the chaos had been almost unbearable. The metallic taste of adrenaline, the sharp sting of blood under her fingernails, the constant hum of threat that never truly vanished. But now, in the quiet aftermath, she methodically cleaned herself in exam room 2, scrubbing at the blood with precise motions. Each swipe of her hands was a bridge between two worlds. The woman capable of killing with surgical precision, and the woman who cradled the fragile, gave medicine, and offered comfort. Two halves of the same coin, balanced on the edge of choice. Outside, Rafael Mendoza limped in, dust and sweat streaking his fatigued face, rifle slung loosely over his shoulder. He had seen the chaos unfold through the ridge, tracked it with GPS coordinates, and witnessed the transformation of a humble clinic into a battlefield of survival. Shepherd? His voice was cautious, reverent. Hannah didn't look up immediately. Her hands paused mid-scrub. "Not anymore," she said softly, her voice carrying a mix of finality and exhaustion. "You never stopped being one," Mendoza replied, stepping closer, extending a small, worn ranger coin into her hands. She accepted it silently, fingertips brushing cold metal, the weight of memories pressing in. The valleys of Afghanistan where gunfire painted the night, forward operating bases in Syria where the only choices were death or mission, lives saved or lost in the blink of an eye. Tonight, she had chosen life again. Outside, the murmurs of the migrants began to rise, children crying, parents holding them, strangers sharing quiet laughs, a chorus of relief and survival. Families reunited, stories yet untold, but the essence clear: they were alive. Hannah watched from behind a small partition, heart steadying, letting the world breathe around her. In a few hours, news outlets would report this as a miraculous story of a volunteer nurse who saved migrants from a border attack. They would not know her call sign. They would not know her rank. They would never know the missions etched into her bones or the lives she had taken or saved in past wars. She didn't want them to. Hannah returned to her routine the next night, same trailer, same patients, same desert light clinic, humming under the Arizona sun. But whispers followed in quiet corners, fragments of legend forming in the minds of those who had seen her act. La Pastor, the shepherd, the nurse who stood between the wolves and the flock. Some people choose healing because they are gentle, because the world demands soft hands. Others choose healing because they know with exact clarity how much the world can hurt, and they are willing to confront it, face it, and protect those who cannot. Hannah Blake, the woman behind the French braid, the scarred hands and the gray-blue eyes, had done more than just save 22 families tonight. She had reminded the world, or at least a small desert corner of it, that courage wears many faces, and heroism often speaks quietly, in measured acts of both strength and compassion. And as the Arizona sun dipped once more behind the jagged Huachuca Mountains, painting the sky in oranges and pinks she would never forget, Hannah closed the clinic doors. Inside, the echoes of survival lingered. Outside, the desert waited, unchanging and merciless, and Hannah Blake, both healer and warrior, stood in the way, so that tomorrow would belong to those she protected.